Joining me to discuss this is Epoch Times reporter Kevin Stocklin. By the way, to get a deeper look at the World Economic Forum and its ESG agenda, visit theshadowstate.com, where you can watch Kevin's remarkable documentary on the topic. Again, please welcome Kevin Stocklin. Kevin, what did the world do before there was a World Economic Forum?
Well, I guess we had a market economy where we could match supply and demand. We seem to have quite a lot of abundance in food and fuel. These things seem to be affordable for a lot more people. So the World Economic Forum has been kind enough to step up and solve those problems for us.
Do they have any idea, Kevin, how pompous they sound?
The lack of self-awareness at this meeting is absolutely stunning. They said that the number one threat facing humanity in the next couple of years is the cost of living crisis, and they are bewildered how this possibly could have happened and who did this to us, seemingly unaware that their war on fossil fuels that's been going on for the last couple of decades and supported by the people sitting at this forum in Davos, Switzerland, is really the cause of the cost of living crisis.
Kevin, what are some of the other crises that they've warned us about?
Well, in the short term, they are basically saying that basic things like food and fuel have become unaffordable for so many people, and we're seeing a descent into poverty for a lot of parts of the world. But they are quick to say that in the longer term, i.e. over the next 10 years, climate change is the number one threat by far facing humanity. And therefore, what we must do is double down on our policies of fighting fossil fuels and transitioning to wind and solar power.
Was there any dissent? Did anybody raise his or her hand and say, now wait a second, we have other problems that are not quite as dire as this, and that technology will probably deal with the so-called effects of climate change that you guys are worried about? Did anybody have a dissenting point of view?
There wasn't a dissenting point of view in Davos, but there's been a lot of dissent in 2022 that I think is causing a lot of concern for Klaus Schwab and the other attendees. I'll just run through a few. So, for example, Sri Lanka has implemented a lot of the WEF climate change policies by banning the import of synthetic fertilizer. That caused a famine and starvation, and it caused the government to collapse and be ejected from the country. We saw conservative governments rise in Italy and Sweden as a response to a lot of these policies. We've seen quite a lot of pushback from red states in the United States that are now passing laws to ban ESG investing with their state pension money. And according to a recent KPMG survey, 60% of CEOs around the world are starting to rethink and reconsider their commitment to ESG. So I think there's a tremendous amount of dissent. It's just not happening in Davos.
Kevin, tell me about Mr. Klaus Schwab. Who is he? How long has he had this Davos thing? And what gives him the clout, prestige, and credibility that people ought to be listening to him?
It's a baffling story. He has a thick Swiss or German accent. I'm not sure which. He's written a number of books on this subject. But somehow he's been able to establish this annual gathering, and they've had record attendance this year. They've had CEOs from about 600 of the top global corporations, 1,500 political leaders. So it's very well attended. And the amazing thing is these policies that they're pushing, we've now seen over the last couple of years how damaging they are, how many people they're pushing into poverty and desperation. And I think we may be getting to a day where corporations, corporate leaders no longer want to attach their company's name to this organization. But for now, it's been record attendance. And for some reason, this is something that global leaders and corporate leaders the world over want to be part of.
Kevin, do they not see the irony, the hypocrisy in flying over there and using these corporate jets while moaning about climate change and saying that we ought to switch from fossil fuels to renewables? Do they not see the inconsistency there?
There doesn't seem to be a lot of irony among this crowd. They don't seem to have any recognition. The corporate jets are certainly one thing. The beachfront property that's being purchased by the Obamas and the Bill Gates family, also seems to call into question their fear about rising sea levels and all the other things that they're talking about. But again, to me, the biggest level of hypocrisy is they seem unable to recognize the damage that these policies have done to ordinary people. And their only solution is to double down and do more of that.
Kevin Stocklin, Epoch Times reporter. Kevin, thank you very much for manning the manning the fort for us over there in Davos. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.